Okay, everyone, we'll kick off. So you're all very welcome to tonight's webinar titled Advancing Nutrient Management in 2025 with PastureBase Ireland. Joseph Dunphy is my name, and I'm delighted to be joined by my Grass10 colleague, Niamh Doyle, and Dr. David Wall from Johnstown Castle as well. Where I suppose we'll get straight into it now. Click on again. So as Niamh said, there's just a slight little quiz or poll that's after coming up in front of you. If you want to just answer a couple of questions on it, they'll only take a minute there while we're getting going. I suppose just for people, if you want to watch the webinars back or watch any of the webinars that the Grass10 team have done, or probably since the COVID times, there's a good bank of stuff there on the Grass10 page on the Teagasc public website. And if you want to click in there, all those webinars are available. I suppose the main reason we're here is really talking about we're talking about nutrient management tonight, and it's a part of a larger campaign that we've been running this week in terms of Nutrient Management Week 2025. So we've had a big focus on social media across our Twitter or our X and our Instagram accounts, with videos that have been going out most days. Be it from our colleagues in grassland agro, in terms of talking about soil fertility and the importance of it, and I suppose the cost of suboptimal P and K, but also I suppose from Paul Maher in terms of PastureBase Ireland, in terms of how we use the PastureBase app, to a higher level. So all these videos are available on our social media pages. So make sure to tune in and and check them out. Again, the Grass10 newsletter comes out every Tuesday. Some people who are joining us here now this evening will be aware of it. So if you're new to it there and you haven't heard of it before, make sure to subscribe to it to get updates every Tuesday on all things grass, on all things nutrient management, on farmer profiles, all is there. Predicted grass growth, soil temperatures, weather forecast for the week is all there. So make sure to tune in. And also, both myself and Niamh are involved in across all the main podcasting platforms. Okay, so the Dairy Edge, the Beef Edge, and Ovicast. So again, if you're listening to them, or maybe you're new to them, there's grass updates weekly at the minute on the Dairy Edge, and also every couple of weeks on the Beef Edge and Ovicast. So make sure you tune into them for tips. So look, without further ado, we're going to get straight into it, and we'll hand you over to David there in a second. I suppose what we want to get out of this, maybe for the next half an hour, 40 minutes, we want to maybe dig into setting the scene on national soil fertility. It's hugely important, okay, especially in, I suppose, a climate of reducing nitrogen allowances over the last few years, more difficult grass growing weather. So it's of huge importance to grassland farmers to make best, have your farm in top class shape in terms of soil fertility. So we're going to dig into that. Want to dig into making better use of your NPK allowances in 2025. Touching on spring slurry as well, how can we use it more efficiently? And again, lime and sulphur, I suppose lime, coming back to it for years upon years, but really in a I suppose a climate of lower nitrogen usage, why, and lower fertilizer usage, why it's so important. Okay, and then maybe for the last 15 minutes of the webinar, we're going to really look on the PastureBase app in terms of and on the app on the desktop, and in terms of putting in soil samples and nutrients applied when you're moving through 2025. So David, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Joseph. Yeah,
and
thanks for the invite to come on.
Good stuff. And if you want to share ahead there, David, and we'll get straight into your main bank of slides.
Tell me when there.
Yeah, you're sharing away there.
Okay, super. Okay, look at as I say, Joseph and Niamh have asked me to come on to discuss, I suppose, early season fertilizer and that it is very, very important, I suppose, going forward, that we think about other nutrients in addition to nitrogen there, because as Joe has outlined there, fertilizer and nitrogen allowances have come down. We have had a cut there in the last 12 months, and potentially under a nitrates scenario they'll come down a little bit further. So having things tuned up in every field, your pH, pK, even sulphur and other nutrients to think about, there is going to be really important going forward. So I suppose what I'm going to bring you through is, soil fertility and how that's driving grass growth. You're well aware of the nutrition of the cows, etc. But the same thing, the nutrition of the grass, and it's not just nitrogen. There's more to the picture than that. And I suppose first of all, bringing you through the response to nitrogen based on different scenarios there in terms of soil fertility. So just a piece of work just to preface this bit is, why build soil fertility at all? Why not just drive on with the fuel and not put in the engine oil? And I'm using that analogy because you all have a tractor there at home, or a loader or whatever. And, if you don't pull the dipstick an odd time, that is something will seize up. And it's the very same scenario there in terms of the paddocks driving grass growth. We can put on the fuel, we can put in the nitrogen, but at some point we have to look at the pH, P and K. And based on the research work, operating at an index 1 or index 2, yes, you can move the cows on if there's a lighter cover in a paddock, and by the time you get around the round, if you have enough grass in front of the cows, fair enough. However, there's an opportunity missed there, and it's in years that the weather doesn't play ball, like 2024, is when you run short and the well runs dry. So operating at an index 1 or index 2, although you mightn't see it in a good grass growing year, there's about 15% of the nitrogen wasted. And if we think about the nitrogen cuts in the last 12 months, we've had a 10% cut. If we have another 5% cut in the next 12 months because of nitrates, there's your 15% that you could have had and carry on as normal. Right, just looking very briefly then at current soil fertility levels on dairy farms nationally. Apologies now if I've discommoded anybody from a dry stock operation, but the figures look very similar as well across grassland. If we think about pH up at the top there, the pH levels in the red box are all suboptimal. So they're all below 6.2 or below. About 39% of paddocks, fields, etc. on dairy farms are low for that. Same thing with P there in the blue and K there in the reddy colour. 38 and 37% respectively. So, to round figures up, about 40% of the farms, or 40% of the area of a lot of farms, could be silage blocks, could be part of the dairy platform, etc. But they're suboptimal for either pH, P and K, or maybe all three,
And David, just sorry to cut it across you there, David. I'm just saying, we've probably heard a lot about, P limits on farms over the last 12 months, and we've no limits on the line piece, we've no limits on the K piece, to a certain extent, and they're still equally, as suboptimal.
No, 100%, and probably the K is suffering because the P is suffering because they're linked in a compound. Farmers are not buying straights or whatever else. But look, in terms of the pH, there's probably no excuse. It's the cheapest fertilizer you're going to buy, and it's doing a lot more, than we maybe give it credit for. So it's switching on the P there in the ground that you might have, but is locked away. So it's turning the switch on that. And also, if there's clover coming into the system, or we're trying to make the farm a little bit more resilient by bringing on clover, putting in clover there and not having the pH tuned up beforehand is a real no-no. And to be honest, 6.2 would be the lowest end of it. We'd probably want to be driving on pH up to about 6.8 for clover. Plus, we don't think about the bugs there in the ground that are mineralizing organic matter, the nitrogen for free. And what we're showing there, if you're operating at a low pH versus operating at a pH of about 6.5, there's about 80 kilos or about 60 units of nitrogen for free there that can be gotten just by tuning up the pH and getting extra mineralization. And if there's many dairy farmers on the call here, you have acid in the parlour to wash the plant in the dairy. It's the same thing. You don't put your hand into it because it's going to burn you. It's the same kind of acids there in the soils. They're going to be hostile for a reseed, hostile for the bugs and that are working for you. Just in terms of some data, real data from farms there, by lifting the pH there from a 5.5 there, the lowest end of that curve, up to the sweet spot there, about 6.3 and above there. On these farms, there's 4 or 5 tons of dry matter to be gotten straight up by lifting the pH, using the same amount of nitrogen there on those. So, that's a kind of a no-brainer for spending in the region 22, maybe 25 euro per ton of lime. Even putting out 2 tons there would be a good start there and a great investment. Just bringing that all together, if we look at what are the opportunity costs there in terms of nitrogen use efficiency by operating at a low soil fertility versus a high soil fertility. So the red bar there is low pH, low P and K. So soil fertility in all respects on the floor. We're getting about 35% nitrogen use efficiency in that scenario. So for every 100 kilos spread of nitrogen, we're only utilising 35 of it. And that's surely a poor investment. If we go to the other end of this, the bars here, go to optimizing pH, P and K, not thinking about sulphur or any other nutrients in the mix here, we were getting about 63% nitrogen use efficiency, right? We haven't put in a new reseed on these 446 fields. We didn't allow for compaction. We didn't do anything else. We just measured the fertility and the nitrogen use efficiency without setting up anything else. And it's like, apples and oranges, chalk and cheese there. So it just shows you operating at a low soil fertility is a real misnomer altogether.
And what's dark about there, David? Sorry, just like by just correcting the pH alone,
is giving you the biggest bang for your buck.
Yes.
100%. So the difference between the red and the grey there is just pH. Everything else is additive. It's a little bit of an add-on. It'll give you a bit of resilience. We'll say the K in a drought, and that's where K comes to its own. And the phosphorus is giving you resilience for either a reseed, getting it up and growing, or starting off your growing season that little bit earlier, which I'll get into in the next couple of slides. P is an early nutrient, K is a summer nutrient. But pH underpins the whole lot. Right, just talking about the early season then, soil temperature and, when we should start, what we should do there. Really a soil temperature 5.5 or 6 is really the starting point. If we're below that, we're not at the races. We're getting about less than 15% nitrogen recovery because look, things are not growing at that stage. Ryegrass begins to wake up about 5 pH or soil temperature of 5.5 and really takes off above that. Obviously, when soil temperatures go above 11 or 12, you're into high degrees of growth, high recovery. But temperature is not the only thing. We think about the early season applications, temperature, but also light. And it's really sunlight that's driving the grass growth, assuming temperature is above 5.5. Right, so we think about January, this time of the year, it's dark, it's gloomy in the mornings, it's gloomy in the evenings. It's basically sunlight is holding us back. Soil temperatures at the moment, it's been a mild back end, a mild start to the year. So temperature is not really holding us back at the moment. Moisture, yeah, depending on soil type, etc. If you're on a heavier soil, obviously it's wetter and there's little drainage. But it's really light is holding us back at the moment. You get to Paddy's Day, and all of a sudden, depending on the year, depending on everything else, it might be a week earlier, it might be a week later, things take off. And if you study your grass growth, if you're on PastureBase and looking at your grass growth curves, and you can go back the years or look at this year and track it, Paddy's Day, maybe a week before, maybe a week later, depending on where you are in the country, things take off. it goes up, and that's a light cue. It's down to physiology and light. So that's where we need to be thinking about the second round soil fertility, getting the phosphorus on. You know, we need phosphorus to drive that growth there in the second round. So probably slurry or a little bit of straight nitrogen in the first round. That's to kick things off. And then we're coming along into the second round, and especially on paddocks or fields that are low in phosphorus, we need to be getting either a slurry on or a compound, a decent compound on there, latter end of February, first week of March. And that's going to really drive your grass growth there into March and April.
And just there, David, at the minute, I suppose, look at the slurry deadline is open. You know, if we had advice there for farmers that are spreading at the minute out of, you know, we'll call it necessity, maybe things are full up and they need to get out. They need to get some slurry out. What sort of rates should they be going at, and what sort of paddocks?
Yeah, look, we have to take the top off tanks. You know, we're up against the limit in terms of slurry capacity in many situations. So no problem, right? We're going out with slurry. The season is open. However, based on those grass growth levels, and based on what I'm just after saying there, that phosphorus is needed probably that little bit later, needs to be well timed. Latter end of February is probably key time in there for that phosphorus. I wouldn't be going out and emptying the tank to the floor at this point. Take enough off, give yourself a little bit of relief. You have cows calving, etc. ahead of you. You don't want to be getting into that business. But probably 1,500 to 2,000 gallons max is all that's needed there. You know, if you can cover more acres, you have enough dry ground ahead of you that you can take the top off the tank with 1,500 gallons. That's perfect. That's enough to keep you going with mineralization and with everything else to grow enough grass. And I'll get into that in the next slide. Right, current grass growth levels, just using a bit of PastureBase information there. Leinster and Munster about 6. You go up the country because of light, because you're more north, it's a bit lower. It's a bit slower to wake up in terms of that. So they're going to be a week behind. You know, as you go up the country, obviously we don't know what's going to come tonight and tomorrow in terms of there's definitely wind coming, but hopefully not too much rain with it to saturate things. But as I've said there in the red box there, you know, high variability between years, but light is the key driving factor, and then temperature and moisture, you know, moderates it, drives it up and down a little bit. Key decisions in terms of applying nutrients. Obviously, applying an earlier and drier soils first. That's more than just travelling with the tractor or the slurry spreader. It's also the drier the soil, the quicker the air is to get in there. And the air and day temperature is actually warming up the soil. If the soil is saturated, it can't warm up because the air can't get in there. So if you have a good, dry, sunny day, the wet soil, the air can't get into it. Right, as I've said, utilise some slurry in the first round, no problem with that. But maximum rates there is not 3, 4, 5,000 gallons. It's probably 2. You're only wasting it if you're going more than that. And only apply fertiliser nitrogen where soil conditions allow. You know, it's a waste. We're under limited, restricted fertiliser use now. We don't want to be wasting it at that point. Right. Look at changing gears then and just getting into that slurry piece a little bit. Slide is not changing now for me for some reason.
You jammed on you.
Yeah, sorry no.
There you go.
Right.
Your way.
Okay. Matching slurry and fertiliser applications to grass demand. So I've just calculated the grass demands there based on the average pasture-based figures, the grass growth curve there in black, the black line there in January, February, March and April, just to give you an idea of what the demand really is, right? So the grass dry matter growth there, kgs per hectare, and I'm talking not per day now, per week. So for a full 7 days, you're growing, you know, somewhere between 40 and 50 kilograms in a good year in January. In February, that goes between 50 and 60. March, obviously, because light is kicking off there and growth is kicking off, somewhere between 60 and 90 for the month of March, from the first week to the next week. And you all know, once you're into April, it's happy days, right? If we think about the total nitrogen uptake there over each of those weeks, you look at January there, there's about 1.5 kilos of uptake in the whole week, 7 days, right? You move up, you're about 2 kilos there in February, and obviously up to 3 kilos and more once you get into the other. That's total uptake. That's not fertilizer demand, right? We start to think about then the soil is supplying some of that and the fertilizer is supplying the rest of it. So if we look at fertilizer demand there over the whole week, I'm taking a 70% nitrogen use efficiency, because fertilizer, soil fertility mightn't be perfect everywhere, etc., etc. And you see there in the red box, the fertilizer demand is small in January. It starts to grow in February. It begins to get more and more and more as the weeks go on. But total demand, cumulative demand, about 9 kilos in January, about 11 kilos in February, 15 kilos in March, and obviously then you're driving on after that. Something else to consider there, once you get into March, there's very little leaching, right? Because of growth, the growth and the photosynthesis is actually driving whatever rain has fallen. Most of that is being utilised and transpired through the plant. So you can't really get it wrong when you get into March. Too bad with nitrogen. However, what you're doing in January and February, you can, and there may be losses out of it. Just if we think about rates of cattle slurry then, right? Gallons per acre, we'll use old money, right? 1,000 gallons per acre is about 9 units with low emission, right? So 1,000 gallons there in January will actually suffice for the month of January, right? So think about it. If we're spreading 3,000 gallons at the moment, or going with an umbilical, and we're not sure of what we're spreading, we're probably spreading too much and wasting valuable nutrients. I know there's comfort in emptying the tank a little bit, but these nutrients are really important. And if you're going in paddocks that don't have a P requirement, that's a real dead loss, right?
And it probably is one of the issues, you know, at the minute, David, is that there is that risk of, if we are having an umbilical that we want to lower, essentially want to lower too far, and we're guilty. We have to travel at quite a speed to get to
you do to get
15 to
those low
2,000
rates.
gallons.
Yeah, you're flying up and down the field. That's maybe not suiting you in terms of pipe work and obviously ground that you have available for that you can travel on. And that's why I'm saying, you know, there is justification to some degree in terms of labour and getting the contractor and worrying about getting them back and setting the thing up only to go halfway or take a third off the top of the tank. However, these are valuable nutrients, and as the thing is screwed down for us in terms of total applications, you know, we'll be crying for more nitrogen. However, we probably have that nitrogen on the farm there in the tank, and we need to use it.
And the P and K for, you know, maybe that little bit later for first cut silage.
Just on that, Joe, just to discuss it there a little bit. If you think about the pie chart there, right? The 1,000 gallons of cattle slurry, the P and K make up the majority. There's 69% of the nutrients in that cattle slurry is your K, and another 20% or thereabouts is your phosphorus. And a little over 10% of the total nutrient value of slurry is actually the N. So, you know, we're thinking about spreading it at this time of the year because of the N. However, if you're buying expensive compounds because you haven't put the slurry in the right place, you know, you'd have to consider what you're doing.
Yeah.
The majority, more than 3/4 of the value of slurry is its P and K value. And you can see there in terms of splash plate, trail and shoe, or if you were injecting it, you know, the P and K values don't change there. It's the N value kind of goes up because you're saving more the N from going up in the air.
Yeah.
Just one more thing on that is, if you look at the ratios here, in terms of P and K ratio, there's a wide ratio. It's 5:32, 5:32, 5:32 in terms of those three bags. Or if we'll think about the ratio, it's 1 part of phosphorus for about 6 parts of potassium. Now, right, the first thing to think about is what are the ratios in terms of grazing versus cutting? If we think about the grazing ratio, it's basically 1:2, right? So you think about what you're taking off in milk, a bit of body weight, and the calf that's being produced there in terms of milk and meat, it's 1:2 on the grazing platform. If we think about silage, it's actually a much wider ratio. We're taking off a huge amount of K in that silage crop, and it's 1:6. So if we think about what we have in the tank, we have the perfect fertilizer for silage, and we have a lot more K than we need in terms of grazing. So, you know, it stands to reason that as much of the slurry that we can hold back should go on the silage, because why buy 0730 or some of those compounds that are set up for silage when we already have it in the tank? And you have to question how much you use on the grazing platform. Right, yeah. First round, fair enough. If we're using 1,500 gallons, fair enough. We'll use a proportion of the slurry in the tank, and we'll have enough for the silage where you'll get the maximum value for your P and K. Right. Any questions or anything on that at the moment, Joe, or any comments?
Yeah, there's I suppose a question in there. If you have the capacity, is March the best month for the slurry application?
100%. 100%. So as I said, the timing of that phosphorus in particular, and remember there's a good deal of phosphorus in the slurry, is actually to drive grass growth. If we think, you know, without getting too technical or into the science, you need energy for grass growth, and to drive that grass growth even higher there in the early part of the year. And because the soils are cold still, to overcome the energy, you have to put the energy in. You have to give the ground a bit of an injection of phosphorus. And phosphorus is the energy. So a well-timed latter end of February, first week of March is the perfect time for putting on slurry, if you have the capacity, that is.
Another question there, Dave, just I suppose it's going to link to the sulphur piece in a minute, but sulphur in 1,000 gallons of slurry.
Yeah, there is sulphur in 1,000 gallons. If we think about units here, there's probably about 2 units or maybe even 3 units of sulphur, depending on how thick the slurry is, right? So obviously more dilute slurry, lower concentration, higher. However, not all that sulphur, the 3 units, is fully available. You'll probably have a unit of it is available. The other 2 units will become available as the slurry is mineralized over time. So it's a kind of a slow release sulphur, you could call it. So what I'd be saying there, for if you're putting out 3,000 gallons for a first cut silage, you probably should put on, you know, if you're using protected urea, a 38% product with some sulphur in it, if that's it, to top things up and drive the efficiency there in terms of sulphur.
Yeah. So you're kind of nearly what's in the slurry is in the slurry. Focus on putting it with the nitrogen in the bag.
Exactly. And look, you're doing a slow release sulphur there with the slurry, so you will get it back. It mightn't just timing, if you were putting it out at closing time for silage or whatever, you mightn't get it within the 6 to 8 weeks that you're trying to grow the silage. So you need to put it there with the fertilizer.
Just another one there. If a field is soil index 3 for P and K, is there any point in putting slurry on that paddock?
Look, you may be justified in putting out a maintenance rate to replace offtake, to keep your soil fertility up at the index 3. For an index 4, I'd be looking somewhere else on the farm and kind of saying, well, I want to get the maximum out of my P and K. Let's put it somewhere where I'm building soil fertility. But yeah, you are justified at an index 3 putting out a maintenance rate of slurry in that situation.
Yeah, but probably, yeah, as you said, but on maintenance, and then if you can target if you've index 1 and 2 paddocks as well. Yeah. But slurry, like we move on now. We're like, it's that silage ground. That's the one.
That's the key. Like, yeah, look, there's no problem following a bit on the platform there, taking the top off the tank at this point with a small quantity in slurry, cover as many acres as you can with that, but holding enough, not drawn the slurry, even if it's an outside block, to the silage block is probably a missed opportunity. And you know, even if you look at the cost of fertilizer at the moment, with a fairly big tanker, if you're able to do a round trip fill and apply within an hour, it still pays you to draw the slurry to the silage block.
Yeah, because of the balance of,
Yeah,
you know,
100%.
you'd probably need to be putting like a, well, about an 0730, and that's still not, you know, you kind of think
Yeah,
a
you
high
still
K
have to buy
product.
in, and
Yeah,
you know, you're not getting the other advantages. You know, we think
and it's
about
still not the
slurry.
ratio. It's still the ratio that, you know, we
Yeah.
want.
No, exactly. The other big thing there is silage ground outside blocks are probably hungry for carbon. They need the other bit of body in them, as people talk about it. You want something, and that's where the organic matter will actually help you as well.
Perfect.
Right, just changing up then, just dealing very briefly with sulphur. Right, this is a bit of recent work that has been done. PhD student Claire Aspel here has done this work, and we looked at a range of soil types. So we wanted to really look into this to see, you know, light soil types, intermediate soil types, and heavy soils. What was the response there in terms of sulphur? And you know, the yellow bars there are dry matter yield with nitrogen alone. The green ones are nitrogen plus sulfur in these, and you can see there in terms of the plus signs, plus 4 tons there in terms of the Oak Park soil. You go to the Moore Park soil, plus 3 tons. You go to a slightly heavier soil there, plus 2 tons. The Ratangan soil is here in Johnstown Castle. It'd be a moderately drained soil, 1.7. Clonroach soil and Castlecomer soil, you know, which is a heavy soil. But in each of those soils, where you're putting on an appreciable amount of nitrogen plus 150 kilos upwards, you're getting a huge bounce from putting on sulphur.
And just
Those
David,
bounces
the rate of sulfur that was applied,
up to 15 kilograms.
15 kilos. Okay.
Right? You don't want, there's not really a need to go over egg it after that. But one thing to say here, silage blocks are hungry for sulphur. More hungry than grazing ground. And the reason being is we do get a lot of sulphur coming back in dung and urine. You know, bypass sulphur coming through the cows, they're deposited. And even if it wasn't available there in the dung patch straight up, it's a slow release sulphur that's catching up on itself every year that you're grazing. But by and large, from other studies, we see that silage blocks, especially those silage blocks that are not getting any slurry, are hungry for sulphur. And
that for that dry ground there, for, you know, you said 15 kilos there, you know, 10, 12 units, Dave, that's a phenomenal response of grass.
it just shows you the inefficiency of the nitrogen without the sulphur. Now,
Yeah.
we can there's one cautionary tale on this. We can oversupply sulphur. And, you know, if we're thinking, Jesus, sulphur every round, and we push it on and we're driving 25, 30 units, you can run into problems there with other trace elements and breeding. At breeding time, you don't want to run into that. You don't want to have the cows and the grass deficient. So 15 units is fine.
Yeah.
Right? You know, and keep it between the ditches at that.
So, and if we were practically there, David, so when do we start with the sulphur, and say over how many applications, you know, ideally would you supply it?
Very good question. So with sulphur, you know, you might be buying compound with sulphur in it, and you might put in some sulphur there in the compound in the second round there in the March application. However, probably into April, if you think about peak growth and dilution in the ground, so the soil can't keep up in terms of supplying sulphur once probably growth rates go above 65. Right?
Okay.
So at that point, you're getting into April territory there. We need to be putting in a nice decent dose of probably 5 units at that point in April. You might skip around then and come back in the later May application with another 5 units. and then skip around and come back in at the latter end of June with the final 5 units. We don't probably need sulphur then after that later on in the year, because you have good warm soils, you have good mineralization, and nitrogen demand begins to go down as grass growth begins to fall off at the back end of the year.
So kind of three applications.
Three applications, well timed, one early to coincide with that grass growth going up, and then just maintenance then in 2 more times once you're at peak growth stages.
Kind of skipping around in between.
Yes.
So, yeah. Perfect. So I suppose it was a key thing there. There will probably be people ordering fertilizer now over these days. So just to be conscious, but especially from that silage piece as well. If people are ordering first cut silage fertilizer,
no, 100%, and get a good whack of sulphur in there. 8 to 10 units for the silage ground, because you're putting on essentially 125 kilos. That's probably 3 splits in one go. And especially where there's no slurry gone on silage ground.
Yeah. So probably kind of like a 38+7 type product.
Yeah. 100%.
Perfect.
Ideal.
Okay, we keep moving.
Just before I get into a little bit of final advice, just to look at the other benefits there in terms of sulphur and nitrogen use efficiency really here, but also nitrogen leaching. I know it's in everybody's mind. There's a lot of talk being talked about in terms of water quality, etc. It really is a no-brainer. Where we applied nitrogen fertilizer on its own, or where in this study, where nitrogen fertilizer was applied on its own, there was a 64% reduction in nitrogen leaching. It's the opposite of the previous slide. Where you're getting more growth, you're getting more use of the nitrogen, and also where the slurry was put on, you can see there the rates are higher there in terms of total leaching, because you're doubling the amount of nitrogen going on there with the slurry. But again, a 61% reduction. So what we're kind of saying here is, even where there's slurry going on, you can still go with sulphur. You can't rely on the slurry to supply all your sulphur requirement.
Okay.
Right. Final piece then, without keeping you all too long, right? Just a bit of advice. How are we going to do the first 2 rounds? We think about the first 2 rounds. The first round is probably a choice between straight slurry or putting out a nitrogen fertilizer, a straight nitrogen fertilizer in most parts. And that's probably the choice here would be protected urea. The second round then, if you have used straight urea and haven't put out slurry in the first round, you would go with a compound in the second round or slurry in the second round. So they are kind of the choices that we have going on there in those 2. We won't worry about the second parts. Sulphur is coming in early there. You can see it at the bottom, starting there probably at the latter end of March and is over by June. And P build-up is front-loaded in this. K build-up is back-loaded. Right, so that just kind of sets out the whole year. But let's just concentrate on the first 2 rounds, right? So we have this farm here in front of us. We have to fertilize the area there outlined by the red, right? So in terms of cattle slurry, if we're going to use cattle slurry, less than 2,000 gallons or up to 2,000 gallons, and February time, if we can hold out to February time, some of that is going out in January, because we have to take the top off tanks. So we'll always have probably 40% of the farm there that was the last to be grazed, has a low cover there that's ready for slurry. And if you closed in the right way on fairly dry ground, thinking about the slurry spreader, that'll be available to you, right? Smaller application rates required early in the season, so don't lambaste the place with slurry. Right, mid-February then, after grazing, we've started in the first round after grazing, so there's probably 15%. We come along, we don't change the application rate, keep it low in the first half of February. As things progress then, we can start to up the rate a little bit after grazing when you get into the latter end of February. And, keep slurry application rates for your silage ground. And that's going to be a 3,000 gallon application rate. So be thinking about that. Right. To finish out that kind of complete the farm then, mid-February, before grazing, you still have probably 30% of the farm there. That's your first. You're taking out the fertilizer spreader at this point. 23 units is probably fine in terms of that. We don't need to be driving it on. In the past, some might have used a full bag of urea at that point. That's probably a waste. We've looked into that. There's probably not a need for that going forward. Half a bag or thereabouts is fine. So that's the first round. We've hit everything now in terms of the first round on fertilizer, and we're finishing out the first round. So in grazing at this point.
So to kind of just summarize, kind of what slurry is kind of kept at that 2,000 gallons, and what doesn't get it is kind of getting that half bag or slightly shy of it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And look at every farm is different. Every operation is different depending on your slurry storage capacity, depending on how dry your ground is. You can make that up for yourself, whether it's slightly more fertilizer and slightly less slurry, etc., etc. But we are thinking about having some slurry left over there for the silage ground, because it'd be a missed opportunity if we didn't.
100%.
Right. So second round, we're now the latter end of February into March, probably into March in most cases for the fertilizer at this point. Right. And you can see the fertilizers, what's coming there up along the top. Right. So the last area grazed is probably going to get somewhere in the region of 35 kilograms of nitrogen at that point. Right. So that's the area, the first area that we put the slurry on with the lowest cover. The last area grazed out of last year, you know what I mean? You need to come back on that. Then we're back up to the top fields and starting all over again. Obviously time has tricked on then, and we can now up the rates of nitrogen fertilizer. As I've said, post Paddy's Day, we're fairly safe. Anything that we don't grow or don't utilise at that point, we'll catch up on it. We'll get it in the next round. Do you know what I mean? So we're in safe territory. We're probably going with 40 units then at that point and moving along through the farm block by block by block, as the case may be, keeping our distance from the previous rounds. We do need to think about those areas, especially this area over here by the farmyard that didn't get slurry in the first round. We need to be putting out a compound at that point in there if the P and K is low. So again, horses for courses, you're going to have to look at your fertilizer plan. Allowances. They're probably, and it's worth saying at this point, there was probably a big fear factor in terms of allowances last year with the fertilizer register coming out. And, lads bought straight nitrogen when they should have bought or could have bought more compound. And this year, consult the soil tests are in there. Anybody that's in derogation or anybody that wants to have a P allowance has to have soil tests at this point. It's not just a derogation farmer pursuit. Try to get to the advisor, get the fertilizer plan done, and before you buy all your fertilizer, look at your allowances and buy your compounds as needed and get it in there.
And is there a place there, David, for that, even if we're slightly unsure on the P allowance, that NKS type product or that NK product?
Yeah, it's phosphorus that's holding you back. And you probably have scenarios there, as you're saying, Joseph, where you might have an index 4 or an index 3 P, and you might need a big allowance or need to put P back there. There is other options out there. An NK or an NKS is available out there. And, as we started off there showing soil fertility, K seems to have suffered because P is suffering, or lads don't have a P allowance. So there's no reason for K to suffer. Buy an NK.
Yeah. And it's probably just something that, it's probably coming from, 18612. And I'm not spreading as much 18612 as I used to. But, I'm hearing that this spring there's definitely a lot more farmers talking about that NK product, this spring, which is good to hear. Yeah. People are becoming more aware of it.
Yeah, and horses for courses, every farm is different. So, getting in with the advisor, developing a plan. That plan is not just for the Department of Agriculture. It's your plan. It'll give you an allowance etc. It'll keep you right by the Department of Agriculture or nitrates or whatever. But, you know, there's a lot of good in that plan. It'll see you right, and it'll, you know, over a couple of years of following those plans, your farm will be well set up to grow grass and to cope with reduced nitrogen fertilizer allowances. So finally, from me, in the interest of time, and I'm happy to take any questions afterwards, just in summary, lower demand of nutrients early in the growing season, you know, that's not rocket science. Keep slurry application rates low. I would say below 2,000 gallons is probably fine. You know, apply slurry to the fields with the highest P and K demand, not necessarily based on the nitrogen. Low covers first, and, you know, follow after grazing from mid-February onwards where there's opportunities to get P and K out. Just in terms of the second round, we do need, if we didn't go with slurry in the first round, we need a compound there, well-timed, latter end of February, first week of March there in terms of that second round. And, you know, follow with straight in fertilizer in 1 or 2 splits from early March onwards. And, you know, we are promoting protected urea. Protected urea wasn't the issue last year. It was actually low grass growth rates because of sunlight and cloudy days, and also drought in some areas and night temperatures. And, you know, I think you've dealt with that in some of the earlier webinars. So look at, I'll stop sharing at this point and happy to mop up any final questions if there are any.
Yeah, and as they come in, we might need you might start sharing there and look at if any other questions come in over the next
we'll come back to it
10
afterwards.
minutes. Yeah.
Perfect.
I think that was extremely comprehensive, and there, you know, there's a few questions there as we went, anyways, David. That kind of, you know, that kind of concluded that nicely, like. So I suppose, look at. You haven't had a chance to say anything at all yet, Niamh. So
now, so right,
Grant,
I
so just for a couple of minutes, just for everyone that's on the call, we're just going to spend a little bit of time on the fertilizer recording piece. It's incredibly important. I think even David, if you want to comment on it as well, you know, knowing and being honest with yourself what nutrients are going out on individual paddocks until you get a stab at it for a year or two, you know, and become aware of it. You know, it's something that really needs to be done. Sorry, Niamh, gone ahead.
Perfect. So I just have opened the PastureBase Ireland app. We're just going to go through how to input on the app first, and then I'll show you on the desktop. So the first thing to do with your app is always sync it. So that's down at the very bottom. So I just want to sync this here now, because sometimes you might have boxes coming up red and stuff like that. So always ensure you sync it. So we go into fertilizer, we go into application list, and we click add now. So for this example, I'm just going to put out slurry. So say we go on paddocks 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I click done. So your list of paddocks will come up there. Then the date, so I'm just going to go with today's date. Fertilizer. So this is done in numerical order, and then it's done in alphabetical order. But as you use the products, they'll come up at the top. So say, for example, we've used this one recently or that one recently. But for the purpose of this, I'm going to go down to cattle slurry.
And at this stage, Niamh, we're between everything. I think there's nearly every type of fertilizer under the sun is in PastureBase at this stage.
Exactly, yeah. So there's a long list. So it's handy though, once you start using them, they will be at the top of the list. So for example, we go spring, dribble bar, dilute. You can do total amount per acre, amount per hectare, or units per acre. For this, we're going to go amount per acre. We're going to put out, say, 2,000 gallons. So you click gallons on this. And then you can click grass, silage, or tillage. But for this, we're going to put on paddock, so it's going to be grass. And you click save. So that then comes up then there on your page. So if we just go back to the start, I'll go through then chemical fertilizer. So same again, we go into fertilizer, go into application list, click add new, select your paddocks. So for example, we'll go 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Click done. The date, I'm just going to put in today's date. Fertilizer then, so you can use protect urea, whichever. The protect ureas now are down the very bottom. So I'm just going to show you, we'll use protect urea with sulphur just for this example. So here are the protect ureas, so we'll use protect urea 38 with sulphur. So the amount type, then you can do amount per acre, amount per hectare, or units of N. For this example, we're going to do units of N. So we put in 23 units, half a bag, and we click save. So that then is down there. So you see a protected area, 75.4 kilos gone on to them paddocks. So if you then want to go into your report,
just there, Niamh, just so like, you know, it's pretty much as simple as that, and it's probably
Yeah.
getting into I suppose a routine of recording it when you're applying it. You know, be it on a weekly basis or when you start this year, it's probably getting into that routine of recording it on PastureBase.
exactly. And look, the app is so handy that if you are out in the field, you can put them in straight away, which some people find differently. They might take it down in a notebook and then put it on the desktop, but whichever preference, but it's handy to have it there because you can keep track of it. So if you then want to go into your application report, it'll tell you then exactly what went out on each paddock. So say, for example, we go into top field here, we can see that slurry went out twice. So last year and this year. But obviously this is just a test example. So, and it also gives then your total N, your PK, and yeah.
So in here, Niamh, as you move through the year, you're going to have for paddock 4 just there at the top, you're going to have, you know, maybe a February application of chemical nitrogen. You're going to have March application of slurry, say first week of April, you know, whatever. That's all going to be done, and that's going to be, we'll call it cumulative and top up as a summary there on that page later, you know, throughout the year.
Exactly. And look, there is an option there, tap on an item below to reorder the list. So if you want to order it by nitrogen application, you just click on total N and it'll change the order of it. So look, that's personal preference. You can fool around with that.
Just Niamh, and back there as well, just, you know, you can just show on the app where the soil fertility coming in there as well.
Yeah. So I suppose this is a soil fertility page. It's handy, I suppose, if you're out in the field and you don't know where to put your slurry around, and you can reorder this as well. Same thing. So say if you want to look at your index 1 K, you click on K index 1. Just see there it's in for top field. You click that, it'll reorder that into 1, 2, 3, 4. So it'll give you your whole list of paddocks. So it'll give you your top ones with low index at the top for K, and vice versa. You can click that for P or PH, whichever.
That's hugely beneficial if, you know, when you're on the fly, tanks are agitated, etc., and you're trying to make decisions there, it's hugely beneficial.
Exactly, yeah. And we can go through now anyhow how to put your soil samples in on the desktop, so that it'll be up here on your app.
Perfect. And again, and I think, you know, like, you know, you can move across over to the desktop. And while we are commenting on that, I think, you know, we're talking about the app tonight, but there's loads of information. Paul Maher from PastureBase has done videos as part of Social Media Week. So make sure after this, if you have any other questions or queries on it, shoot over to Instagram or shoot over to the X account. The videos are all there. They will actually all be up on YouTube over the next couple of days. So all those videos are there as tutorials on terms of you know, slurry application, fertilizer application. So, you know, get stuck into it from the start.
Now, can you see the screen?
Yeah, we can do, yeah.
Perfect. So just for your soil sample results, you can link them with the lab. So you go into soil lab results, and you go into lab affiliation, and you can select your lab here. So say, for example, you go to IAS Carlow, you don't have to put in your co-op or supplier number. All you click is continue. So this is, say, if you send your soil samples and you want them uploaded onto PastureBase. Click continue. So this then will send all these details then to IAS, and you just click submit. And then that'll be up there. Okay.
Permissions come back in. Yeah, super.
Yeah. Then to look at your soil test results, you go into lab results, soil test results. So this then will give you your list of soil test results. If you want to add them in manually, you click add new soil test. Okay, so say, for example, you done paddocks 3 and 4 together. Click them. Your pH was 6.1. Your K was 120, we'll say, for example. Soil test, you done it back, say, the 6th of January, and your P was 5. And you just click save. So there you can see them two have come in, index 3, index 4. Now, there was actually another example, there was another soil test in for that, but now, also, if you look at this, then it's kind of color coded. So your index 1s will be white, your index 2s are blue, and then your index 3s are kind of a light green, and then your index 4 is a dark green. So that's color coded. Then if you go to your soil test report, you can look at this in more detail. So look, I suppose if you have most of your data in on PastureBase, such as your total nitrogen, your total P, your total K, your lime spread, your number of grazings, your number of silage cuts, it'll allow you to compare paddocks and also then compare and get correlations then between, say, your index 1 or your index 2 paddocks and vice versa. So look, there's a lot of information there if you have all the information in on PastureBase.
And I just to comment on that first, a bit like your ICBF information or using PastureBase for putting in grass measurements there. Like, this is a one-stop shop, and I think this is where if obviously this is a demonstration account, but if you had soil samples recorded over the last couple of years, you had your total NPK put in. Then you have obviously the grazings if you're doing 30 plus measures, over a 4 or 5 year period there. Like, the information that's on there on there is absolutely massive. Do you want to comment on that there, David?
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, you can track your progress, you can track your drawdown as well. So, if you think you're after putting out a healthy amount of slurry or P and K and compound or whatever, and you're losing ground in terms of a P and K, that can actually diagnose what the problem is there straight away. The other big thing here is where you have grass growth for the whole year and you also have your total N. Just say your total N was the same for all the paddocks. It was a kind of a blanket approach across them all. If you have only 10 tons grown in some paddocks and 16 tons in other paddocks, for the same nitrogen rate, you can diagnose, is soil fertility actually holding you back on that? Or, is it a reseed or whatever the case? But it's really, really powerful information there in terms of, what level of growth are you getting for your spend or your input of N? Or P or K for that matter, but N being a real important one there. That, the information is yours. You may as well have it and you may as well be using it. So yeah, no, I think it's a powerful tool.
As you said, it will kind of rise if we have a wedge type shape of our tonnage of grass grown on the farm. By looking at this every year and improving, we'll flatten the curve.
Yeah,
we'll bring up all those bottom paddocks, and try and again, it's all about being more efficient, growing as much grass as possible. With the nutrient allowances that we have.
Yeah, exactly. And look, there's also pie charts there, so that shows you in different colors and your percentages of index 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4, and then also your optimum fertility status. So yeah, that's also useful. Also, you can view these on the farm mapping. I'll just quickly show you this. So now look, this is just a test account, so we don't have the whole farm mapped. But just for example, you click fertility, it'll show you the pH. Now there are no soil tests, but for example, you'll see the different colors there. So that's pH 6.2, 5.9, and 6.1. We go then to P. So this might be handy if you're going out spreading and you want to print it off. It'll show your different colors then. It's color coded, and then also for K. Yeah.
The lime one there, Niamh, if you have a lime contractor coming in.
Exactly. Ideal.
Very, very easy there to
handy.
Hand them that and away you go.
Yeah. Color coded and everything, yeah. Just then we were talking about the fertilizer then. Just to know, I won't go through this, but just to note where to put the fertilizer in, it's similar to the app. You just go fertilizer slurry, add new. And it's similar to the app there. You select your paddocks, your date, your fertilizer, and then your units per acre and click save. And then your list of applications will come up there.
I think, that's obviously, the desktop is handy, but, even showing what you did there on the phone, Niamh, I think, getting people to, as they go, putting the fertilizer and slurry in on the app is where the game is at.
Yeah, much easier. Yeah. And you can do it on the go. So it's more convenient.
Perfect. Good stuff. Good stuff. Super. So that's all you covered there, Niamh, is it?
Yeah, that's everything. Yeah.
Brilliant. Super. That's great. Now we're bang on the hour. We'll take any last questions for any of the panelists. I see a couple in there. Any recommendations, David, on testing of slurry?
Yeah, look at testing a slurry is it's key. You don't have to test it every batch or every year or even that, but it's worth testing it once in a while. If you have the same type of stock in the same sheds on the same diet year after year, other than the dilution rates or whatever might vary, it's good to do a test to see what you have in the tank, and then obviously you can work out your application rates based on that. There are some tools there that advisory services have access to, or farmers can have access to, such as the hydrometer. So basically, once you have a tank agitated, you take out a bucket of slurry out of it and you drop in your hydrometer, and that'll give you a dry matter reading. And the dry matter is highly correlated with nutrient concentration. So there's a ready reckoner or a chart there that you can read off what your nutrient value is. So, if you have more dilute slurry after cow's calf, or you have the dry cow slurry in another tank, as the case may be in some farms or some situations, that can be a good thing to do. But certainly doing a test, if you go for a lab analysis, it's costing there in the region of between 40 and 50 quid in most lab analysis there. It's well worth doing from an agitated tank. You know what you're spreading, and if the system is fairly same from year to year, you could go on that and use it, update it every couple of years rather than every year.
Good stuff. Just on back to soil sampling, David, and probably where we're encouraging people now before nutrients are going out to make sure they're taken. Question in on when reviewing the soil sample results, what pH value do you use? Is it the water or the buffer?
Yeah, that can be a bit confusing. So it's the water pH is the pH in the soil at the moment. So it tells you the level of acidity that's there when the soil sample was taken. The buffer pH is something that's used to calculate the lime requirement. So it's a different thing, and largely can be ignored on the soil report. They give it to you because maybe an advisor might need it or whatever else, but your pH in water is your pH. That's what you're on today. And the lime requirement, actually, that calculation uses the buffer pH. So that's why that's in there.
Okay, good stuff. Just applying slurry there, David, to grass, red clover, reseed. I'm assuming here on a multi-cut system. Sort of rates.
Yeah, look at obviously if there's grass in the red clover, did you say, Joe?
I think grass, red clover,
So it's probably a dedicated silage sward or silage with very little grazing on the back of it. What I'd be looking at there is similar to your grass rates. You need P and K in there, so probably your 3,000 gallons for your first cut, and then following through if there's enough slurry available to give it slurry on subsequent cuts if there is slurry available. But no issue. The little bit of N that you're applying, or the 30 kilos of N that you're applying with the 3,000 gallons roughly, is not a problem. It's not going to antagonize the fixation in the red clover.
Okay. There's two last questions. Back to the point you made earlier, then there's an interesting one on the K. We're probably seeing more droughts on the drier farms there, David, since 2018. Maybe just explain how that K piece works in the drought.
Yeah, so in terms of K, K basically is linked with water storage in the plant. So turgor, cell turgor, if you want to use a technical term. So where you're deficient in K, the plant has less storage of water and will succumb to drought that bit quicker. So basically what the plant is doing when it's fortified with K, it puts K in place where there's salts actually being leached out and going out with the K, and it holds on to that water so a lot more effectively. So the onset of drought is slower where a plant is fortified with K. Now, obviously, if the drought persists, you know, K is not magic either. It's not water, so it can't do that. But you'd see it there in the last couple of years where there has been severe droughts or even, you know, 6-week droughts. K can certainly do the job.
And it's back to that point about the thing. It's about being more resilient, you know.
Yeah, it's a resilience thing. You know, we're getting more swings and roundabouts with the weather, and if we can put things in place and be clever in terms ahead of time to have that bit of resilience. So if it's a little bit of phosphorus there in the spring to deal with cold hash marches, or if it's a bit of a K later on in the year, etc., or resilience because we have lower nitrogen limits and we want to get better efficiency, all those things count.
Okay. With 2 last questions, and we're going to leave it at that then. The sulphate of ammonia, David, to get, I suppose, maybe
the sulphur in. So a great product overall. Traditionally would have been used maybe at silage time, where there would be a bit of the split would go out as sulphate of ammonia, and the rest would have traditionally gone out as can. You know, it is a good product. It's high nice little bit of sulphur in it, and can be used in a grazing round as much as it could be used in silage.
And just for our listeners, the breakdown roughly of sulphate of ammonia, like in you know.
Yeah. So in terms of
common products, common products, like, you know,
kind of common products in terms of how much of sulphate of ammonia would be in there or whatever. So look at in terms of products that are out there at the moment, there's sulphate of ammonia often put in there. So you could have a protected urea product with some sulphate of ammonia to make up that sulphur in that. So it is there in the background in many of those compounds or products with sulphur, that's the actual sulphur source.
Okay. Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So you're getting it rather than buying a straight sulphate of ammonia product per se. You're getting it probably mixed with straight nitrogen products to make up an NS product.
Okay, and just the percentage of sulphate of ammonia, you know, in that straight.
Yeah. So in terms of sulphur, they can make it up depending on the products, but you could push it up to somewhere 7-8% of sulphur in some of those products.
Okay, perfect, good stuff. Last question on bales, offtakes.
Yeah.
Where are we at?
Yeah, really good question. So we often ignore bales where we're taking them out of the grazing platform because it's not really silage and it's more opportunistic. However, as a rule of thumb, right, for every ton of dry matter that we're harvesting, we'll use units, 4 units of P and in the region of 20 units of K. Right? So I would have said in kilos, it's 5 and 25.
Yeah.
Right? So for every ton, so if you're taking off bales, it's probably a cover of 2.5, maybe even 3 tons of dry matter. You're talking about somewhere in the region of 12 units, and the big number is 60 to 65 units a K. So taking off bales will bring down your K index very, very fast.
And so that's maybe where that kind of, you know, a low rate of cattle slurry back on.
No, 100%, 100%. So, you know, if there's summer slurry in the tank, or even, you know, the collecting yard and everything else is going into a slurry tank rather than a soil water tank, that should be going back on where there's bales coming out on the grazing platform, because there's a hell of a lot of K coming off.
Okay, perfect. Super stuff. Look, we're an hour and 10 minutes. I'm going to cut it there. Again, look, the recording is going to be up on YouTube. The recording will be on the Grass10 page on the Teagasc public website. It'll be on our social media channels over the next couple of days. So if anyone wants to, you know, watch back and maybe see some of there's an awful lot covered there, a super amount of information. I was trying to jot down some of the summary points there, David, and it's even, I know you summarized your piece, but, like, you know, there's a lot of real key stuff there. And, you know, even back to the pieces there on, I suppose, you know, that affect that nitrogen use efficiency. If we're suboptimal in terms of, you know, lime, P and K, we're only using about 35%, you know, of that nitrogen, like, you know, so we're wasting, you know, getting that liming right, the ability to, you know, grow 4 to 5 more tons of grass, you know, the huge point, though the light soils as well on that sulphur piece, like, you know, those lighter soils there, Oak Park soils there, 3 to 4 ton, that's a massive amount of, you know, of grass that's being lost on some of those lighter soils. And even as you said there, David, even on the heavier soils, you're probably still seeing a half a ton to a ton, you know, of grass growing. And I think, you know, summarising nicely there at the minute, you know, the slurry, that thick cattle slurry, you know, high rates should be saved for the silage ground. You know, over the next couple of weeks, it's dilute cattle slurry at the 1,500 to 2,000 gallons, and you know, half a bag of nitrogen, and then we increase the rates as we move towards as we move into, you know, late February and early March. So listen, without further ado, David, thanks a million for coming on to us. Niamh, thanks a million again for the contribution. As I said, this is all part of Nutrient Management Week, apart for the Grass10 team. So tune into social media channels as well. And just lastly, I'd like to thank the sponsors of the Grass10 campaign, Grassland Agro, Department of Ag, FBD, AIB, and the Farmers Journal for their continued support. Listen, safe farming as we come into the busy spring period, and be careful over the next 24 hours. Depending on where you are in the country. Us poor souls over in the west are going to get the worst of it. So thanks a million to everyone again. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.